In the world of military aviation, one aircraft rules supreme. Built to put American pilots back in charge of the skies, it is the ultimate air fighter, able to climb to the height of Mount Everest in just 60 seconds.
Oh, the F-15 is an absolute dream to fly. It was so exhilarating and so sexy and just incredible.
It proved its value in both Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom, flying thousands of successful missions against Saddam Hussein's forces. This jet was at the front of the strike force, its role to sweep enemy aircraft out of the skies.
I thought it was absolutely magnificent.
With firepower second to none and the maneuverability to outfly its opponents, its track record is astounding. Over 100 air-to-air kills for no losses. Not one single aircraft has been lost in air-to-air combat in over 30 years of service. Whoever controls the F-15 controls the skies.
It's the greatest airplane in the world.
Using extraordinary archive film and color reenactments, heavy metal flies into battle with the F-15 Eagle. January 16, 1991, Operation Desert Storm. American air attacks in Iraq are poised to begin. Flying at the front of a great wave of coalition aircraft are 20 F-15 fighters. Over 40 miles into Iraq, their radar picks up enemy contacts. Captain John Kelk leads the flight of F-15s. He is the first to hear the radar warning tone in his headset. Enemy fighters are targeting his plane.
You got someone locked, interrogate, bandit.
Kelk is not sure the aircraft ahead are hostile, but as the jets close in at over 1,400 miles per hour, the F-15 pilot must decide, should he shoot to kill? His radar shows a fighter flying aggressively towards him, so he prepares for combat. Closing his eyes to protect his vision from the anticipated explosion, he slams the pickle button on his stick, launching an air-to-air missile. Seconds later, an orange explosion lights up the night sky. Kelk has become the first American to score an air-to-air kill in the F-15. 30 years of planning have finally paid off. But the F-15 story begins decades earlier, deep in the Cold War years. In 1951, the Korean War is raging. American F-86 Sabre pilots fight pitched battles with Russian MiGs. These American pilots first learned their dogfighting skills during the dark days of World War II. In Korea, they achieve an alleged kill ratio of 10-to-1 against the Soviets.
10-to-1 kill ratio that the F-86 had seemed to be something that was to be aspired to, but would never be matched, which seemed to be the benchmark. I mean, it was like Babe Ruth hitting 60 home runs in a season. I mean, who is ever going to break that record?
Once again, the Sabres have proven more than a match for the Red Jets. Chalk up another for the Sabres with no losses of their own.
By the Vietnam War, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots are flying F-4 Phantoms against a new generation of Soviet-built MiGs. USAF planners decide the new aircraft should fight at great distances using guided missiles. They believe the age of the dogfight is over. But missiles don't always find their targets. In fact, only 14% of the first AIM-7 missiles ever hit anything. And when the Phantom's missiles fail, the fighter is left completely defenseless. The F-4 has no gun.
A fighter that doesn't have weapons isn't a fighter. And the issue with the F-4 in Vietnam, though, was that the Sparrow, the radar-guided missile, and the Sidewinder, the heat-seeking missile that the airplane carried, were designed to be shot against large bomber-sized targets at high altitude. When you take a system designed, optimized for that, and then employ it against small fighter-sized targets, highly maneuvering at lower altitudes, the results are not pretty, and they weren't pretty for us.
Soviet MiGs flown by Vietnamese lure F-4s in close, knowing they are soft targets. But the American pilots are not trained to dogfight. That knowledge from World War II and Korea has not been passed down to this generation of fighter pilots.
The training that I had to go to Vietnam was abysmal. And new pilots that came into their organizations that were supposed to be there to go fly air to air and dogfight with the MiGs, the training was not even as good as abysmal. It was just, in fact, non-existent.
The American F-4s and their pilots are left dangerously exposed.
If you're an F-4 pilot in the midst of a dogfight, you've used up your radar missiles, they all missed, which they always did, and then you fired a few of your infrared missiles, and by bad luck or because you didn't have a good position, they missed. Now you're out of ideas and out of ammunition, and you better go home because you're in trouble. They're going to get you unless you can get out of there, because you don't even have a gun to fall back on.
The F-4 had originally been designed to down nuclear bombers. When pushed into a dogfight, its limitations are all too clear.
The F-4, like almost all the airplanes that were designed to be electronic radar interceptors, had horrible visibility because the designers were totally focused on somebody with his head down in the radar scope, either the pilot or the guy behind him doing that. And all you needed windows for was to take off and land, because the radar was going to be your eyes. Well, that's a quick way to a quick death in combat, because the guy who kills you is never out front. He's always the guy who's behind you.
These mistakes prove costly. Over 3,000 American aircraft are lost.
For a good part of the war, we didn't get much better than 1-to-1 exchange ratio, which all things considered was a disgrace. The Air Force took it as a disgrace, and it was a disgrace.
Air Force planners know they need a new aircraft, the ultimate dogfighting machine. A plane that can achieve air superiority in any theater of action. 500 designs are submitted for the FX Fighter Experimental Program. But Air Force chiefs are not impressed.
The 500 designs that were returned from the first request for proposal were all rejected because they simply did not break the mold.
The Air Force urgently needs to regain the aviation advantage. Unexpected developments in Russia suggest they are losing the race. At the 1967 Moscow Air Show, the Soviets unveiled their next generation fighter, the MiG-25 Foxbat.
It would have looked to the intelligence analysts as though this was a force to be reckoned with. It would certainly have put the fear of God into them, because you've got an aeroplane that can fly at up to Mach 3, that can climb to 60, 70,000 feet, and that is easily going to be able to chase down and beat any fighter that the Americans had to put up against it.
The race is now on to build an American plane that can outfight the Soviet MiG. Little does anyone know, the result will change military history forever. After losing the aviation advantage to the Soviet MiG-25, American aircraft designers go back to the drawing board. Planners must recruit somebody who really understands fighter planes. They need a guy with hands-on experience of aerial combat, matched with great technical insight. Eventually, they find their man. He has honed his combat skills in Korea, but made his name developing air-to-air tactics at Nellis Fighter Weapons School. His name, Major John Boyd.
At that time, he was known as the Mad Major. He was a guy who was totally focused on air-to-air combat, had dedicated his whole life to first whipping every other fighter pilot in the Air Force and the other services, and secondly, developing theories on how to do that, brilliant new theories that change the way every Air Force in the world flies.
Major Boyd is asked to evaluate the existing Fighter X proposals. The early plans will eventually become the new Air Force fighter.
They brought this uncouth genius to the Pentagon, said, here's what we have for a design, give us your evaluation. And John said, well, I don't know much about airplane design. He said, but I could screw up and do better than this.
Boyd realizes that without a completely fresh start, the Air Force could end up with yet another underperforming plane, like the F-4. Maneuverability must top the list of design specifications. Boyd needs to get his hands on the most powerful computers of the day. The Air Force has rare mainframe machines, but bureaucrats deny him access. Always inventive, Boyd manages to log unofficial time, working after hours. But the Mad Major's erratic behavior makes him enemies inside the Pentagon. One hostile colonel accuses him of stealing $1 million worth of Air Force computer time. To some senior officers, John Boyd would always be a dangerous maverick.
In the end, even though John caused these upheavals and had like unending complaints from every area of the bureaucracy about his behavior and what he was forcing him to do, in the end, the chief of staff always supported him and he actually arrived at quite a brilliant design.
John Boyd does in fact produce revolutionary design specifications for the new Fighter X. 3 companies are then invited to compete for the chance to build the FX fighter. They have 9 months to create a polished design. By the 1969 deadline, a clear winner emerges. The contract for the new fighter is awarded to the McDonnell Douglas Corporation. In all, 2.5 million man-hours go into the design of the plane. Finally, on June 26, 1972, the first F-15 is rolled out of the St. Louis factory. The following day, the Eagle takes its first flight.
After knots, rotate.
It is immediately clear that this airplane breaks the mold.
The F-15's climb rate was awesome, but it was also an important part of it being an effective interceptor. From standstill, it could reach a height of 30,000 feet, which is the same height as Everest, in a little over 60 seconds.
There has also been a revolution in the cockpit. Equipment is designed to free a pilot from distractions. Whether attacking or defending, a pilot must stay focused on the enemy, not the aircraft's instruments. One radical new design is intended to simplify flight displays. It's known as the HUD.
A HUD is a heads-up display, and it helps us in so many ways because we don't need to look down for any information. Everything that we do and everything that we need to see is right there in front of us. You got your altitude, you got your airspeed, you've got your Mach number, your G's available, the G's that you're actually pulling, what mode you're in, whether you've got a shot on somebody, if you're trying to shoot him with a missile, whether or not you're ready for a bomb to come off. Everything that you need to see is right there in front of you, so you don't have to look anywhere else for it.
While the HUD projects information onto the canopy, the hands-on throttle and stick, or HOTAS system, means a pilot should not have to look down to fire weapons. Something crucial in the heat of battle.
HOTAS was designed to make it easier on the pilot